So when we turn our attention then to the high school technical etude, we want to note that it's in the key of B flat major, and there's a large section starting at measure 17 that is in the key of G minor that we want to take note of, particularly the fact that F sharp accidentals carry through the measure, and you also want to be especially sensitive to the interval between F sharp and E flat from the key signature during those bars. It is a technical etude, and like many technical etudes that you encounter, there's lots of fast moving notes that don't really seem to stop. But in preparation to be able to play this, you need to make sure that you have the air capacity necessary to sustain a musical line. In other words, you want to make sure that you're equipped to have a nice, consistent, constant airstream underneath all of these notes that you're going to be playing. So, as preparation for that, I might suggest that in addition to obviously practicing the notes in this etude, that you spend a good bit of time working on your long tone exercises to develop the breath capacity that you're going to need to be able to play an etude like this. So when we think about the issue of breathing, we want to make sure that we're looking at good spots and consistent spots to be able to breathe throughout this etude. Some of those spots hopefully are obvious, but some of them may not be so. I don't believe any of them are marked for you. So this is sort of the strategy that I would recommend as far as when and where to breathe to be able to play through this etude successfully. So obviously you're going to start with a nice full breath. Breathe at the rest in measure 5, the rest in measure 8, the rest in measure 13, the rest in measure 16. Those ones should be hopefully obvious. Breathe after the high D at the end of bar 22. Breathe at the rest in measure 24. Breathe after the high D flat dotted quarter note in measure 32. Breathe at the rest in measure 35. Breathe at the end of bar 41, the end of bar 45, and then finally after the B flat tie in measure 48. You're going to have to break that tie and sneak a breath in before you continue down the scale, but that should make sure that you have enough air to really finish this etude strongly. You'll want to learn this first in simple 6/8, meaning that there would be 6 beats per measure and the 8th note gets the beat. Once you're able to play everything in the correct rhythmic position relative to the 8th note, you're welcome to start thinking of it in compound meter or 2 big beats per measure. But if you just start by thinking of it in 2 big beats per measure, you're very likely to rush, and the technique between your beats is likely to be sloppy and unclear. So again, if you can learn this in simple 6/8 with 6 beats per measure, it's going to really refine your technical control. Make sure that you are especially attentive to the rests in measures 5 and 6, and also 13 and 14. There are going to be lots of people that neglect these and just blow through them and end up playing 2 bars of 4/8 versus 2 bars of 6/8. So again, make sure that you observe those measured silences in 5 and 6 and 13 and 14. Be careful in places like measures 4 and 12 not to rush the hemiola that's present in those measures. So if you're sort of clipping along with the 1st and 4th 8th notes being the most important in the measure, when you get to measures 4 and 12, all of a sudden there's a shift, and then the stress is on the 1st, 3rd, and 5th 8th note. That's going to really invite a lot of people to rush. So make sure in those places that you are very, very, very clear and consistent with your rhythmic pulse. Understand that the meno mosso that's written in measure 17, where it shifts to G minor, literally translates to less motion. What we as players should interpret that to mean is play slower. And I would encourage you to not be necessarily so subtle about it. If it says play slower, make sure that your tempo is noticeably slower and more relaxed. And I think that a nice small retard in measure 24 as you approach the end of the G minor section is a nice sort of way to conclude that before you resume the odd tempo at measure 25. So I think probably the hardest measure to talk about, or at least to play in this etude, is measure 40, because of the large intervals that are present there and sort of the awkward technique. So what I did in learning this is I used the left hand C lever for all of measure 40, And for all of the C's in measure 40, even though technically I only have to do it when I'm coming from E flat, I put the left hand C down for the entire measure, and I held the key down for all of the notes in that measure. It is sort of a calculated risk that you're going to have to weigh, because if you leave that left hand C lever down, it is going to make your E flats a little bit under pitch. But if you are playing this at a rapid tempo, it's very unlikely to be noticed. So as you're working on this and you're sort of negotiating the technique of measure 40, you might consider using the left hand C for all of the C's in that measure, and consider leaving the lever down for that entire measure. That way all of the technical effort can be concentrated solely into the right hand. And obviously you want to watch out for other spots in this etude where you have to use the left hand C lever when you're coming from E flat, such as measures 4, 12, 46, 53, and 54. All of those spots have a C that moves directly to an E flat or vice versa, and so you're required to use the left hand C lever there to make sure that you don't get any technical blips in between the C and the E flat. So your success in this etude is as much about maintaining a nice, even, and consistent airstream as it is about your ability to play all of the notes and rhythms correctly. Practice slowly, practice smartly, and practice accurately, and then gradually increase your tempo so that you can have better control and better consistency with your technical execution here. So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Good luck to you as you prepare.